You could have anyone, she said. The billionaire CEO chose the waitress who took the bus home. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's emotional story about two women finding love across two completely different worlds, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It only takes a moment, it is completely free, and your support helps us continue bringing you heartfelt, dramatic, and unforgettable stories about courage, dignity, healing, and love between women. Your support truly means the world to us. And before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here with us. Now, let us return to our main character, and the unexpected night when a billionaire sitting alone at table 17 noticed a waitress rushing to catch the last bus home, and both of their lives quietly began to change. You gave back $1,000, the woman said, staring at me as if I had just done something impossible. Most people would have kept it. At 11:43 on a rainy Thursday night, I had no idea the woman sitting alone at table 17 could buy the entire restaurant without checking her bank account. To me, she was simply Claire, a striking woman in her mid-40s wearing a charcoal suit, drinking untouched coffee while the dining room slowly emptied around her. I was Hannah Brooks, 32 years old, 6 hours into my second shift of the day, with $47 in tips folded inside my apron, and exactly 17 minutes to catch the last bus home. I should have been thinking about closing checks and whether my mother remembered to take the casserole out of the oven. Instead, I kept noticing Claire. There was something unusual about the way she watched people, not suspiciously, carefully, like someone accustomed to entering rooms where everyone changed the moment they saw her. Earlier, a young server named Lily had accidentally brought sparkling water instead of still. Lily was new and immediately began apologizing, but Claire simply smiled and said, "It's water, not a national emergency." I nearly laughed. Later, when a frustrated customer complained sharply about a delayed order, I stepped in before Lily could panic. "I'll handle it," I whispered, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. The problem took 3 minutes to fix. By the time I returned to table 17, Claire was watching me again. "You do that often?" she asked. "Do what?" "Protect people." I placed her check beside the coffee cup. Everybody needs somebody in their corner once in a while. Something changed in her expression, so quickly I almost missed it. Then my eyes landed on the signed receipt. The bill was $86. Beneath it, Claire had written a tip of $1,000. My heart stumbled. "Ma'am, I think you added an extra zero." I didn't. Her voice was calm. "Then I can't take this." For the first time all evening, Claire looked genuinely surprised. "Why not?" I tore off the customer copy and placed it beside her hand. "Because you had dinner, not open-heart surgery." A soft laugh escaped her. "Keep it." I shook my head and adjusted the tip to something generous but reasonable. "Thank you, but no." Then I glanced at the clock and nearly groaned. 11:51. Oh no! I grabbed my coat, called goodnight to Lily, and hurried through the front doors into the rain. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, and my shoes were definitely not designed for sprinting on wet sidewalks. Behind me I heard Claire call my name, but I couldn't stop. Missing that bus meant a $40 rideshare I couldn't afford. I reached the shelter just as headlights appeared down the avenue. Only then did I glance back. Claire stood beneath the restaurant awning, perfectly still, watching me. A sleek black car waited at the curb beside her, its driver holding the rear door open. I climbed onto the bus, breathless, and looked through the rain-streaked window. Claire was still there. What I couldn't possibly know was that Claire Whitmore had spent years surrounded by people eager to accept everything she offered. That night, the woman who could afford almost anything had become fascinated by the waitress who had simply told her no. For the next 4 days, I told myself I had forgotten about Claire. That was a lie. Every evening, when the restaurant doors opened, some ridiculous part of me looked toward them before I could stop myself. On Tuesday at 7:15, Claire walked in wearing a navy coat and carrying no umbrella despite the drizzle outside. The hostess started toward her, suddenly nervous, but Claire looked past her and found me near the coffee station. "Table 17 available?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "You have a favorite table now?" "Apparently." I seated her myself. This time she ordered grilled salmon, iced tea, and the chocolate cake she had ignored on Thursday. Nothing unusual happened. That was what made it unusual. Claire asked how my day had been, and when I mentioned that my morning job at a neighborhood bakery started before sunrise, she did not respond with pity. She simply said, "That sounds exhausting. It pays the electric bill," I replied. "Electricity is one of my favorite luxuries." She laughed, and I discovered I liked being the reason. Claire returned Thursday, then Saturday. By the following week, Lily had noticed. "Table 17 is here for you," she whispered as I filled water glasses. "She is here for dinner." Lily gave me a look that said neither of us believed that. Claire never demanded my attention. She waited until I had time, then asked small questions that somehow produced honest answers. Favorite movie, favorite season, why I hated olives. In return, I learned that she drank coffee after 10 at night, disliked crowded parties, and could not cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. She seemed almost ordinary until the restaurant manager appeared beside her table one evening, looking as if the governor had arrived. "Miss Whitmore, I apologize. I did not realize you were dining with us." My hand stopped halfway to the coffee pot. Whitmore. I knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. Whitmore Hospitality Group owned luxury hotels, office towers, and properties across several states. I looked at Claire. "You are Claire Whitmore?" She gave me an apologetic smile. "I was Claire before you knew my last name." Suddenly the tailored coats, the waiting car, and the $1,000 tip made sense. After that I became careful. Claire noticed immediately. "You called me ma'am 3 times tonight." Professional habit. You never did before. I had no answer worth giving. Near closing, I found her receipt beneath the coffee cup. The tip was $200. I walked outside before she reached her car and held the receipt toward her. "Claire." She turned. "We have discussed this." "I know." "Then why?" Her expression softened. "Because I wanted to do something kind." "Then do something kind for someone who needs it more." The next evening, I learned she had. Lily showed me a receipt from another table. Claire had left the kitchen and service staff a generous shared gratuity with no name attached. I said nothing when Claire returned 2 nights later. I only brought her coffee. Near midnight, I noticed the untouched bread from a canceled order and packed it with 2 sealed meals the kitchen would otherwise discard. Claire watched me tuck the containers into a paper bag. "Dinner for later?" she asked. "Something like that." After closing, I carried the bag 3 blocks to Mrs. Palmer, an 81-year-old widow in my building who had been recovering from surgery and hated asking anyone for help. I left it at her door, knocked, and waited until I heard her cheerful voice from inside. When I turned around, Claire was standing beneath the streetlight. "Were you following me?" I asked. "I was going to offer you a ride." Her eyes moved toward Mrs. Palmer's door, then back to me. "You gave your food away." "It was not my food. You could have taken it home." I pulled my coat tighter against the cold. "I have enough for tonight." Claire became quiet. In that silence, something shifted between us. She had spent weeks trying to understand why I would not take more. Standing beneath that streetlight, I think she finally understood the answer. I was not waiting for someone wealthy to change my life, and somehow, that seemed to make Claire want to know me even more. The rain started just after 11, soft at first, then steady enough to turn the restaurant windows into sheets of silver. By closing time, the sidewalks were shining beneath the streetlights, and I was standing under the awning checking the transit app on my phone with growing disbelief. "Cancelled," I muttered. Claire stepped outside behind me. "What is—" "My bus." I refreshed the screen. The next route was delayed too, and the last connection home would leave before I could reach it. Claire glanced toward the black car waiting at the curb. "Let me drive you." "No." "Hannah, it is raining." I noticed. "Your bus is cancelled." Also noticed. Her mouth curved into the restrained smile I had started recognizing. "You make accepting help remarkably difficult, and you make offering it remarkably persistent." I considered paying for a rideshare until the price appeared on my screen. $43. Absolutely not. Another bus could take me within a mile of home, but I would have to walk to a stop 6 blocks away. I pulled up my hood. Problem solved. Claire looked at the route on my phone. "That is your solution? Welcome to public transportation." I started walking. 10 seconds later, footsteps followed me. I turned. Claire was beside me, holding an umbrella over both of us. "What are you doing?" "Learning." "About what?" "Public transportation." I stared at her. "Your car is 20 feet behind us." Claire looked back at it, then at me. "It will survive without me." I laughed despite myself. 6 blocks later, Claire Whitmore, Billionaire Chief Executive Officer, was standing beside me beneath a scratched plastic bus shelter while rain tapped against the roof. When the bus arrived, she hesitated at the fare box. "You do not know how this works, do you?" I asked. "I usually have people who know how things work." "That sounds dangerous." I paid my fare. Claire copied me, and we found 2 seats near the back. The bus was warm and nearly empty, carrying only a tired nurse, a college student wearing headphones, and an older man holding grocery bags. Without the restaurant around us, Claire seemed different. Smaller somehow, not physically, but in the amount of space she expected the world to give her. "When was the last time you rode a bus?" I asked. She watched the city slide past the rain-streaked window. "I was 19. "Seriously? My mother and I used to take one everywhere." "That surprised me. I assumed you were born with a driver." Claire smiled, but sadness touched her eyes. People assume many things about money. For several blocks, neither of us spoke. The bus hummed through wet streets while storefront lights drifted across her face. "Why did you stop?" I finally asked. "Riding buses? Remembering what it was like before all this?" Claire looked down at her hands, because I spent years believing success meant getting as far away from that life as possible. Her answer felt heavier than I expected. Maybe success is being able to go back without being ashamed. She turned toward me. Our shoulders were almost touching beneath our damp coats. Nothing dramatic happened, no grand declaration, just a quiet look that lasted long enough for me to forget the rain. "You always say things like that?" she asked softly. "Only when I am tired," she laughed. Then the bus announced my stop. We stepped off together, and I pointed toward my apartment building a block away. "You can call your driver now." Claire glanced down the empty street. "I could, but—" She looked toward the disappearing bus, then back at me. "I think I have been missing more than I realized." For the first time, I understood that Claire had not followed me onto that bus because she wanted to rescue me. She had followed because something in her own life needed rescuing, and somehow she was beginning to believe I might help her remember what it was. Claire did not come into the restaurant the next night, and I was more disappointed than I wanted to admit. She did not appear the night after that either. By Friday, I had convinced myself our strange little connection had been nothing more than a billionaire briefly fascinated by a life different from her own. Then, at 8:20, table 17 was occupied again. Claire looked tired. Not the kind of tired fixed by sleep, but the kind people carry behind their eyes. I approached with my order pad. "Coffee, please. Chocolate cake? Are you judging me?" Professionally. Her smile returned, and something inside me relaxed. Later during my break, I found her waiting near the quiet end of the bar. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You usually do." "Why 2 jobs?" I almost gave her my standard answer about electricity being a luxury, but the bus ride had changed something between us. My father died 3 years ago. He left some medical bills and other debt. My mother could not manage everything alone, so I moved back home for a while. Claire listened without interrupting. "I was taking classes at community college then, business administration. You stopped?" I postponed. "There is a difference?" "There has to be." I smiled, although the words hurt more than I expected. I keep telling myself I will go back when things settle down. Claire became very still. "How much would it cost?" My stomach tightened immediately. "Do not." I was only asking. "No, you were calculating." She looked genuinely confused. "Calculating what?" "How quickly you could fix it." Silence settled between us. I softened my voice. "Claire, I know you mean well. But every problem in my life is not an invoice waiting for you to pay it." Her eyes dropped to the coffee cup. "I am sorry." The apology was so immediate that it surprised me. "I am very good at solving problems with money." I noticed. "It is efficient. People are not companies." Claire looked up. There was no defensiveness in her face now, only thoughtfulness. "Then what should I have asked?" I leaned against the counter. "You could ask what I need." She nodded slowly. "All right. What do you need?" I expected the question to feel awkward. Instead, it felt strangely kind. I thought about my mother asleep in our small apartment, the unopened college catalog on my dresser, the endless shifts, the fear that postponing my own life had quietly become my life. "Tonight," I said, "just sit with me for 10 minutes. So she did. No advice, no checkbook, no promises. We sat at a small table near the kitchen and shared a piece of chocolate cake while I told her about my father teaching me to change a tire when I was 16 and my mother singing old Motown songs while cooking Sunday breakfast. Claire told me she had not eaten breakfast with another person in years. "That sounds lonely," I said. She stared at her fork. "It is." Those two words changed the room. For the first time, I stopped seeing Claire as a woman who possessed everything I lacked. I saw someone who had built a life so large that somehow there was nobody sitting beside her inside it. When my break ended, I stood reluctantly. Claire looked up at me. "Hannah?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not letting me fix you." I smiled. "Thank you for finally realizing I am not broken." As I returned to work, I understood something that frightened me more than her wealth ever had. I was beginning to care whether Claire felt lonely, and caring about someone was much harder to control than keeping my distance. 3 days later, Claire asked me to have breakfast with her, and when I reminded her that my mornings belonged to the bakery, she surprised me by appearing there at 6:10 on Sunday. She wore jeans, a simple gray sweater, and an expression that suggested being awake before sunrise violated several personal principles. "You look confused," I said, setting a mug of coffee in front of her. "I am trying to understand why anyone voluntarily sees this hour. Some of us cannot schedule sunrise for noon." Claire smiled, but then her attention shifted toward the city bus stopping across the street. Something distant entered her eyes. "My mother used to wake me at 5:30, she said. "We lived in a one-bedroom apartment outside Baltimore. She waited tables at a hotel restaurant downtown." I stopped wiping the counter. Claire had mentioned her mother before, but never this. "She was a waitress?" "For 22 years. Claire wrapped both hands around the warm mug. "She would come home smelling like coffee and lemon cleaner, and her feet always hurt. When I was little, I thought she was the strongest person alive." "What changed?" Claire stared into her coffee. "I became successful." The answer was so unexpected that I said nothing. She continued. "I started believing everything from that life represented something I had escaped. The apartment, the bus, her uniform. I bought her a house when I was 30, and I thought that proved I was a good daughter." "Did she like it?" "She loved the garden." Claire smiled faintly. "But once she told me she missed riding the bus with me, because that was when we actually talked." The outside morning light spread between the buildings. Suddenly I understood why that rainy bus ride had affected her so deeply. It had not introduced Claire to my world. It had returned her to her own. "When did she pass away?" I asked gently. 7 years ago." Claire looked toward the window. "And I spent those 7 years building more things she would have told me I did not need." I reached across the counter and rested my hand over hers. It was not planned. Claire looked down at our hands, then up at me. Neither of us moved for several quiet seconds. "Your mother would probably be proud of you," I said. "Maybe. Not because of the buildings." Her eyes softened. "You never make anything easy, do you?" "I make excellent blueberry muffins." She laughed, and the heaviness lifted. After my shift, we walked through a nearby park where bare branches were beginning to show the first signs of spring. Claire bought 2 coffees from a street cart and proudly announced that she had paid without assistance. "Remarkable progress," I teased. At a crosswalk, our hands brushed. This time, neither of us immediately pulled away. Claire stopped beneath the changing traffic light. "Hannah, I do not know what I am doing." "Neither do I. That is unusual for me." "I know." She smiled nervously, and somehow seeing Claire Whitmore nervous made my own fear easier to carry. She leaned closer, slowly enough to give me every chance to step away. I did not. Our first kiss was brief and gentle, less like an answer than the beginning of a question neither of us was ready to name. When we separated, Claire looked almost astonished. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and the warmth disappeared from her face. "I need to take this." She stepped several feet away. I could not hear everything, only fragments carried by the cold morning air. Acquisition, development schedule, tenant notices. Then one sentence reached me clearly. "Move forward with the restaurant property." I looked across the street at Claire, suddenly unable to breathe normally. Because there was only one restaurant property her company had been discussing in our neighborhood, and it was the building where I worked. For several seconds, I stood beneath the traffic light, pretending I had not heard Claire's words. "Move forward with the restaurant property." The sentence repeated in my mind while the pedestrian signal changed from white to red. Claire ended the call and returned, but one look at my face told her something had shifted. "Hannah?" What restaurant property? She hesitated. It was barely a second, but I saw it. Claire. Whitmore Hospitality has been evaluating several properties in this district. Including mine? Her silence answered before she did. Yes. The warmth of our first kiss suddenly felt very far away. How long have you known? The acquisition team identified the building months ago, before I met you. That was not my question. Claire looked toward the park, then back at me. I knew the project was still active. I folded my arms against the morning cold. And what happens if your company buys it? Nothing has been finalized. What happens, Claire? She exhaled slowly. The current proposal involves redevelopment, which means the restaurant closes. Possibly. I thought about Lily, our kitchen staff, the dishwasher saving for his daughter's college tuition, and our manager who had worked there for 14 years. These were not numbers on a report. They were people whose rent came due every month. Why did you not tell me? Because I did not want business to become part of this. It already was part of this. I just did not know. Claire reached for words, but for once the woman who could command a boardroom seemed unable to find them. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. After the deal closed? No. After I lost my job? Hannah, please. Her voice was quiet. I was trying to understand what options we had before frightening you over something that might change. That should have sounded reasonable. Instead, it hurt. You decided what information I could handle. That was not my intention. Intentions do not erase consequences. Claire looked down. I could see that she understood, and somehow that made the moment harder. I can stop the acquisition, she said. There it was. The instinct I had warned her about. Fix it. Pay for it. Make the problem disappear. No, Hannah, I have the authority. That is exactly the problem. She looked startled. You cannot make a business decision affecting hundreds of people just because you kissed one waitress. The words landed between us. Claire said nothing. If the project is wrong, then prove it is wrong for everyone. If it is right, then explain what happens to the people whose lives are attached to that building. But do not turn me into an exception because you care about me. Her eyes met mine. You are not an exception to me. Then do not treat me like one. I walked away before she could answer. For the next several days, Claire did not visit the restaurant. I told myself that was better. Then, Thursday afternoon, our manager gathered everyone near the kitchen before dinner service. He held a white envelope with the Whitmore Hospitality logo in the corner. My stomach dropped. The building owner has entered final negotiations to sell, he said. The room became painfully quiet. Lily looked at me because she knew about Claire. I looked away. That evening, just before closing, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire asking to meet. I stared at it for nearly a minute before replying. We met outside beneath the same awning where she had once watched me run for the bus. I should have told you sooner, Claire said. Yes. I thought waiting would protect what was growing between us. I swallowed hard. When you have that much power, Claire, silence is still a decision. Her face changed. No argument, no excuse, just recognition. You are right. I wanted that admission to repair something. It did not. I need space. Claire nodded, even though I could see how much it cost her. She did not offer money. She did not promise to save my job. She simply stepped back and let me choose. As I walked toward the bus stop alone, I realized the greatest test of Claire's love would not be what she was willing to give me. It would be what she was willing to change when there was nothing she could receive in return. For 12 days, Claire stayed away. I counted them without meaning to. Every time the restaurant door opened, I looked up, and every time it was someone else, I told myself the small disappointment in my chest was relief. The sale negotiations continued. Rumors moved through the staff faster than orders on a Saturday night. Lily worried about finding another job. Our manager started making calls. I updated my resume after midnight and tried not to imagine starting over again. Then, on Tuesday morning, Lily sent me a link to a local business article. I almost ignored it until I saw Claire's name. Whitmore Hospitality had delayed the redevelopment proposal and requested an independent review of its effect on employees, small businesses, and neighborhood residents. More surprising was the final paragraph. Claire had removed herself from the acquisition committee because of a personal conflict of interest. I read that sentence 3 times. She had not canceled the project for me. She had not secretly bought the restaurant. She had done exactly what I asked. She had stepped away from the power she could have used in my favor and forced the company to examine whether the decision was fair to everyone. That evening, our manager gathered us again. Whitmore is offering relocation assistance if redevelopment proceeds, guaranteed interviews at other properties, and a transition fund for every employee affected. Lily squeezed my arm. She listened to you. Maybe, I whispered, but I knew this was bigger than me. Claire had listened to all of us without most of us ever speaking to her. 2 nights later, I found her at the bus stop. No driver, no black car, just Claire in a dark wool coat, standing beneath the shelter with her hands in her pockets. My heart immediately forgot every speech I had prepared. "Are you waiting for a bus?" I asked. I was hoping for a waitress. I tried not to smile. That line probably works better in boardrooms. Almost nothing I know works with you. For a moment, we simply listened to traffic moving over the wet street. "I read about the review," I said. Claire nodded. "The board was not pleased." "Did you lose the deal?" "Maybe." "How much money?" "Enough that you would tell me I was ridiculous if I gave you the number." I looked at her carefully. "Did you do it because of me?" "You made me look at something I had stopped seeing." Her voice was steady. "There are people behind every spreadsheet. I knew that once. Somewhere along the way, I forgot." "And us?" I asked. Claire's expression softened. "I do not know if there is still an us. That is not mine to decide." Those words reached somewhere deep inside me. A month earlier, Claire would have tried to solve the uncertainty. Now she was standing in the cold, allowing it to exist. "You could have anyone," I said quietly. "Someone from your world. Someone who understands private dinners and board meetings, and whatever people do in penthouses." Claire smiled faintly. "Complain about elevators mostly." I laughed despite myself, then became serious again. "Why keep choosing something this complicated?" Claire looked toward the approaching headlights in the distance. "Because everyone around me knows what I can give them. You were the first person in years who wanted to know what I could give when money was not the answer." My throat tightened. "Claire, you do not have to say anything." The bus appeared at the corner. Claire stepped back, giving me room to leave. That small movement affected me more than any grand gesture could have. She was not asking me to forgive her because she had changed a corporate policy. She was not demanding a reward for doing the right thing. She was simply letting me choose. The bus doors opened. I placed one foot on the first step, then turned around. Claire was still beneath the shelter. "Are you getting on?" I asked. Surprise crossed her face. "Do you want me to?" I held her gaze. "I am not ready to pretend everything is fixed. I understand. But you can sit with me." Claire smiled, quiet and genuine, and followed me onto the bus. As we took 2 seats near the back, I realized forgiveness was not the same as forgetting. Sometimes it was simply allowing someone the chance to show that what they had learned would last beyond the moment they wanted you back. For the next 3 weeks, Claire and I did something neither of us was particularly good at. We went slowly. There were no expensive gifts, no surprise reservations at restaurants I could never afford, and no promises designed to make the difficult parts disappear. Instead, Claire met me for coffee before my bakery shift. Sometimes she rode the bus home with me after the restaurant closed. Once, she came to Sunday breakfast with my mother and spent 20 minutes trying to convince her that scrambled eggs were a legitimate culinary achievement. My mother waited until Claire went to refill her coffee before leaning toward me. "She watches you when you are not looking," she whispered. "Mom, I am only reporting what I observe." I tried to dismiss it, but later I caught Claire doing exactly that. Something warm settled inside me. Still, affection did not erase what had happened, and Claire never asked me to pretend otherwise. The independent review eventually recommended preserving the restaurant through a revised development plan, while creating stronger protections for the other small businesses on the block. Claire had remained outside the final vote. When I heard the news, I called her. "Did you know?" "Not until this morning." "And you really stayed out of it?" "You asked me to let people have their own choices." There was a quiet pause. "I am trying to learn." That sentence mattered more than the outcome. A few evenings later, Claire met me in a neighborhood diner after my shift. Nothing fancy. 2 cups of coffee, 1 slice of apple pie, and a waitress who called everyone honey. "I owe you an apology," Claire said. "You already apologized." "Not completely." She folded her hands on the table. "I spent years believing love meant providing. My mother worked constantly, so when I became wealthy, I decided money was how I would make sure nobody I cared about struggled again. I never understood that helping someone without listening can become another way of controlling the situation. I studied her face. There was no polished executive certainty there, just Claire. I was angry because I thought you saw me as someone who needed saving, I said. I do not. I know that now. She reached across the table, then stopped before touching my hand. That tiny hesitation told me everything. She was waiting for permission. I closed the distance myself and placed my hand over hers. Claire exhaled softly. There is something you need to understand too, I said. What? You are not the only person choosing here. Her eyes lifted to mine. For weeks, everyone has acted like this is some unbelievable story about a billionaire wanting a waitress. I shook my head. But I get a choice too. Your money does not automatically make you the prize. Claire smiled. That may be the most Hannah Brooks sentence ever spoken. I am serious. So am I. Her smile faded into something gentler. Do you choose me? I thought about the woman at table 17, the woman on the bus, the woman who had made a mistake, and then changed without demanding forgiveness as payment. I choose the woman who learned to ask instead of assume, I said. I choose the woman who can sit beside me without trying to redesign my life. Claire's eyes shone. That sounds surprisingly specific. I had time to think. She laughed softly. Then I leaned across the small diner table and kissed her, brief and tender, while coffee cooled between us. When I sat back, Claire looked happier than I had ever seen her. In that ordinary booth beneath fluorescent lights, I finally understood what had changed between us. Claire had stopped trying to bring me into her world, and I had stopped assuming there could never be room for her in mine. We were building something in the space between them, where neither money nor pride got the final word. By early summer, my life had not transformed into some glossy fantasy where every problem disappeared because I was dating a billionaire. I still woke before sunrise for bakery shifts. I still worked evenings at the restaurant. I still checked grocery prices and carried an umbrella because ride shares remained unnecessarily expensive in my opinion. But one important thing had changed. I had re-enrolled at community college. I paid the first semester with money I had been saving for years, and when I showed Claire my registration confirmation, she did not offer to cover the tuition. She simply wrapped me in a warm hug and said, I am proud of you. Somehow, that meant more. Whitmore hospitality changed too. The review of our neighborhood became the beginning of a company-wide program offering education assistance, job training, and transition support to hourly employees across its properties. Claire insisted the program apply equally to everyone who qualified. No special exceptions. No private favor carrying my name. When I asked why she had pushed so hard for it, she said, because I finally started asking who pays the human price when a spreadsheet says we are winning. The restaurant remained open under the revised development plan, and Lily eventually became an assistant manager. Mrs. Palmer continued pretending she did not need anyone, while accepting every meal I brought upstairs. My mother continued asking Claire questions that would have terrified most corporate executives. Claire loved her for it. And Claire changed in smaller ways too, the ways nobody wrote business articles about. She started calling employees by name. She visited properties without announcing herself first. She took Sundays off twice a month, which apparently caused no collapse of the American economy. Most importantly, she stopped apologizing for where she came from. One rainy Thursday night, almost 6 months after I first returned her enormous tip, I finished my shift at 11:38. Through the front window, I saw Claire's black car parked across the street. I smiled, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. Claire was nowhere near the car. She was standing at the bus stop. I walked toward her beneath my umbrella. Your car is right there. I know. Your driver looks confused. Across the street, the poor man did look confused. Claire smiled. He is adapting. I stood beside her. Then why are you waiting for the bus? She looked at me with the same quiet expression I remembered from table 17, except the loneliness was gone. Because you are on it. I laughed. That is incredibly sentimental for a chief executive officer. Do not tell the board. The bus appeared several blocks away, its headlights glowing through the rain. Claire reached for my hand, then paused, still preserving that tiny space where my choice lived. I took her hand myself. We climbed aboard and sat near the back, exactly where we had months earlier. Outside, the city moved past in reflections of gold and silver. I thought about how easily I could have misunderstood our story. Claire had not rescued me from an ordinary life. My life had never needed rescuing. And I had not saved Claire from wealth or success. Those things were not the enemy either. What we had done was harder. We had challenged each other to see what our separate worlds had taught us to overlook. Claire taught me that accepting love did not mean surrendering independence. I taught her that generosity without listening could become control, while generosity rooted in respect could change far more than one person's circumstances. At my stop, we stepped into the soft summer rain and walked toward home together. Behind us, the bus continued down the avenue, carrying strangers toward lives we would never know. Claire squeezed my hand. I looked at her and understood that love was never about who had more to offer. It was about two people meeting without keeping score, choosing each other freely, and becoming kinder because they had.